Does The Prince of Egypt take place in the same world as Shrek? Do the Croods movies somehow set up the wild robot? Is it even possible for all of the Dreamworks animated films to exist in one cohesive universe? It might seem impossible, but, well, we're shooting for the moon with this one. Hello Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that once again wants to say, hey theorists! So last year, our team put together the Disney Theory, putting all of Disney's main animated films into one single timeline. This was inspired by the Pixar Theory, the same idea except for Pixar, obviously, first created by John Negroni and then picked up by several other online theorists like our friends, the Super Carlin brothers. Honestly, it was some of the most fun I've ever had on a project, and I think that you guys agreed because there were a lot of you in the comments asking if we could do the same thing with Dreamworks, and I thought, yeah, good question.
Finally, a worthy opponent. Our battle will be legendary.
It sounded simple enough, right? Well, that was until I realized that we were trying to connect everything from a caveman comedy, an epic battle between dragons and humans, a bee-based courtroom drama, and so many talking animals, like way more talking animals than you'd expect. So me and the team got together and immediately started a rewatch of the 54 Dreamworks animation films. That's actually 8 fewer than we covered for the Disney timeline, so piece of cake, right? Wrong! This was actually one of the most challenging projects we've ever taken on, and it's literally taken our team a year to put together the research for this. Why was it so difficult? Well, just like with the Disney Theory, most of the movies were pretty ambiguous about when and where they take place, so we had to really put in the work to get the dates to line up, taking into account historical references, landscapes and architecture, clothing, the source material, and Easter eggs, all so we could come up with the strongest possible conclusion. But unlike Disney, Dreamworks movies are really concentrated in the 20th and 21st centuries, meaning that there's way more overlap, let alone all the spin-off shows and stuff from other franchises that Dreamworks has worked on. Seriously, did you know that after Universal bought Dreamworks, they had animated kid shows for both Jurassic Park and Fast and Furious? Or that Dreamworks in general has just made 60 TV series? Sorry, we're good, but I don't think anyone's good enough to work in velociraptors roaming the earth and Dominic Toretto's Familia alongside donkey, dragons, and supervillainous aliens. So here's how we're gonna run things today. Firstly, we're focusing mainly on the official canon of Dreamworks feature animation. That means that we will be looking almost exclusively at the main movies created by the main Dreamworks studios released in theaters. So if they worked on one movie in a series, but nothing else, like the first Wallace and Gromit movie, then we will count that, but not the prequels and sequels that Dreamworks didn't work on. That being said, we might include stuff from these non-theatrical movies and shows if it helps us place our main movies on the timeline. In fact, we might also include, marketing material for that same reason. Yeah, there was a surprising amount of information hidden in places like trailers and commercials, which made our lives both simpler and more difficult at the same time. So we created a sort of hierarchy of evidence for the Dreamworks canon, just in case there were some contradictions. At the top of this hierarchy, anything we see from one of the main movies, that stuff's canon. It's the authority. But right below that, on the second tier, we have the TV shows and non-theatrical sequels and prequels to help fill in the gaps if and when we need it. And finally, at the bottom, we'll have what I'll call supplemental material. That's stuff like trailers and commercials, but also video games, books, posters, all that jazz. This will help point us in the right direction, but we'll only really resort to that if we have to. Next, I want to give a massive shout out to all of the Dreamworks fans on Reddit and the wikis for their hard work cataloging a lot of the information about these films. We literally could not have done this without you guys. And just like the Disney Theory, this was not something we could fit into one video given our timelines and the holidays coming up. So just like last year, we're going to be splitting this up into 2 parts, but to make up for that, I do have a question for you, loyal theorists. Who do you think would win in a fight? Shrek, Toothless, or Poe? If you think it's Shrek, go to the comments and use the word onion in your reply. For Toothless, comment the word wingspan, and for Poe, use the word bamboo. Using those words will make it way easier for us to tally things up. I also considered throwing in the penguins of Madagascar in here too, but asking someone to fight them would be like asking them to battle Jackie Chan in a chair and ladder factory. You ain't winning that, bub. Anyway, leave your comments and I'll let you know who you think will win in part 2 when it hits before the end of the year. And finally, before we get started, listen, we gotta pay the bills. Sometimes trying to talk to someone on the phone ain't as fun and silly as a kid's animated movie. It can feel like you might as well be on the moon with crappy service service and so many contracts and catches. Everything's so difficult to understand. But that all changes thanks to the partner for today's theory, Mint Mobile. If you don't know, Mint Mobile is a wireless network that's trying to challenge the industry norms. They cut to the chase and don't want you overpaying for features you don't actually want or need. It's just their premium service starting at $15 a month. Trust me, you almost certainly would be covered by Mint. They have the largest 5G network in the country, covering 98% of Americans. And their 4G LTE network gets that up to 99%. They don't want you to overpay for some crappy one-size-fits-all deal. You get to choose the amount of data that feels right for you, that will work with what you need. So if you're a loner ogre living in a swamp that doesn't need to talk to anyone, maybe a 5GB plan makes sense. But if you're a busy bee talking to anyone and everyone all over, maybe you might want to go with the unlimited data plan. Whatever makes sense for you. Switching over is also super easy. You can keep your own phone or get a new one from Mint. You can keep your own phone number and your contacts, and you can sign up and activate service with an eSIM all from the comfort of your own home. Fun fact, but 96% of users are highly satisfied with Mint's customer care, and on the off chance that you're just not feeling it, hey, all of their plans come with a 7-day unconditional money-back guarantee. And right now, Mint is offering new customers their best offer of the year. All unlimited plans are 50% off, so go click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen to get 3, 6, or 12 months unlimited for just $15 a month. Thanks again to Mint Mobile for sponsoring today's theory, but let's get back into this DreamWorks timeline.
Skadoosh.
In the beginning, there was nothing. And then, forces beyond our comprehension created the universe. Yeah, in this canon, some higher power, whether you want to call it an extra-dimensional being or a godlike character, created the DreamWorks universe. And this being would later become known to many people of the DreamWorks version of Earth as the god of the Abrahamic religions.
Who made man's mouth? Who made the deaf, the mute, the seeing, or the blind? Did not I?
Not me, Your Excellency. The explanation comes from God.
So, yeah, things are already starting off crazy. But they immediately get crazier because probably the biggest, most recurring thing that sets the DreamWorks timeline apart from our own, well, certain celestial bodies like the moon seem to have some sort of magical powers. Yeah, whether that's the same power as the higher being or something else, who can say? We'll touch on big examples as we go through the movies, but the moon in the DreamWorks timeline is particularly special, giving off some sort of magical power or radiation or something that has impacted the entire universe and diverted the timeline. And because of that, the moon, or whatever power it has, becomes personified. Sometimes it's called a man in the moon, but other times it's depicted as a little boy casting a fishing line down to the earth below. Yeah, the DreamWorks logo itself is canon to this timeline. You'll love to see it. But moving on from that, we come to the first film in the DreamWorks canon, The Croods, and all of its caveman antics. And already we hit complicated territory. See, the Crood family appear to be early Homo sapiens, which would place this film in the Paleolithic era, roughly 300,000 years ago. And thanks to the Croods, a new age, and the Berman family's advancements in agriculture and permanent shelters, we should be able to pin that down even further to the Neolithic Revolution around 10,000 BC. Easy, right? Well, here's the problem. See, the first Croods movie builds up to an event called The End, where major changes in plate tectonics split up the major continent of Earth. And it seems like this is supposed to be when Europe and North America split apart in the real world. According to some estimates, this took place around 55 million years ago, which lines up perfectly with the marketing material setting these movies during the made-up Cretaceous period, 55 million years ago. Now, IRL, that would be ridiculous. Our distant ancestors 55 million years ago would have been around the size of a pygmy mouse lemur. Oh, just look how cute this little guy is. But I guess the higher power in the moon entity protected the early humans and prolonged evolution. Even the Croods TV series seems to acknowledge that the moon is watching over them.
The moon's looking at me funny again. We need to go smash his face!
And they also believe that the moon has magical powers. I love how weird and consistent that is. Anyway, the next few dozen million years go by without any major additional events in the timeline, with humans slowly evolving and civilization slowly building up. But alongside them, due to the influence of the moon magic, animals begin to evolve and mutate into fantastical creatures. Some are able to understand or even speak human languages, while others have their bodies changed, allowing them to stand up and seem remarkably human. Because of this, many set up their own communities distinct from humanity. In some cases, they remain close to human civilization, while others retreat to far corners of the world like the Valley of Peace or deep in the ocean. Other animals animals are transformed by the moon magic and become creatures that are only legends in our world. Think dragons and yetis, krakens and fairies. Magic and myth are very much a part of this world, which leads to several stories that are important religious events in our timeline to be actual events with explanations in this very different Dreamworks timeline. For example, this eventually gets us to Joseph, King of Dreams, based on the biblical story from the book of Genesis. There's some debate about where this tale slots into history, but plenty of biblical scholars place it in Egypt's second intermediate period, which would be sometime between 1700 and 1550 BC. Just for simplicity's sake, we're gonna put this smack dab in the middle at 1625 BC. And that checks out, as this is a story about Joseph helping an Egyptian pharaoh save food to help his people outlast an upcoming famine. When that famine eventually hits, many people flock to Egypt looking for food, including Joseph's family and many early Hebrews. Sadly, just like in the real world, several generations later, many of these Hebrews find themselves enslaved by the current Egyptian pharaoh. This brings us to the events of the Prince of Egypt, which tells the biblical story of Moses from the book of Exodus. As with Joseph's story, there was some debate about when exactly this was supposed to happen, but because Moses' adoptive brother is identified as Ramesses II, that lets us put this movie around 1250 BC. The Prince of Egypt also gives us our first real glimpse at the true power of the moon in this universe. I mean, just check out the climax of this film. Just before Moses parts the sea, the sky darkens and we get some dramatic lighting, almost as if the sun has set and the moon has come out to watch. In fact, the entire trek through the Red Sea takes place at night, and the water falls back down when the sun rises. And I mean, hey, these movies are clearly very different versions of the biblical stories. Throwing in some moon magic doesn't really make it all that much more different. But with that, we need to fast forward quite a bit, thousands of years into the future to the Middle Ages. During this time jump, humans did their human thing and caused a great deal of friction with the creatures they shared the earth with. Many of them are hunted, while others are forced into hiding. More or less, they start the process of becoming legends, though they still exist out in the world to some extent. Around 0 AD, an intelligent turtle named Uguay leaves his home in the Galapagos Islands and travels the world to learn about other cultures. He visits several corners of the world before eventually settling in what is now China, where he discovers a beautiful pool overlooking the Valley of Peace. Here, he meditates and eventually creates the martial art of Kung Fu, teaching the skill to various humans and animals alike. This then leads us to the events of Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas. They made this one easy for us, since every version of the Legend of Sinbad takes place during the early Abbasid Caliphate between the 700s and 800s AD. After this, we jump forward a couple hundred years to the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy. Obviously, these take place during Viking times, but you might not know that that spanned from the 8th to 11th centuries, the 700s to 1000s. Thankfully for us, though, there are clues in the films themselves to narrow it down even further. Firstly, we see in these films that Viking culture has been around for a long time, going back many generations and hundreds of years.
300 years, and I'm the first Viking who wouldn't kill a dragon.
That puts us towards the end of the Viking Age, but believe it or not, we can dial it in even further thanks to some Tier 3 sources. The art book for How to Train Your Dragon 2 mentions that the story takes place a millennia or 1,000 years ago. Same with the companion book To Berk and Beyond, which is set 10 centuries ago. And finally, and most comically, we can thank the 2010 Winter Olympics for an exact date. Yeah, really. During that year, Dreamworks made several promos to tie in with the games, showing the franchise characters participating in their own Olympics. And the date on those promos? You guessed it, 1010 AD. That would mean that the first film is in 1010 AD, the second in 1015 AD, and the third in 1016 AD. The end of this trilogy also sees a big change to the world and explains the end of the Viking Age as the dragons retreating into the Hidden World, a subterranean cavern where they can be safe from humans. But don't worry, loyal theorists, dragons don't disappear entirely from the Dreamworks universe, but we'll get back to that. For the time being, though, across the world, in an isolated community of anthropomorphic animals in the Valley of Peace, a panda named Po is named the Dragon Warrior during the events of Kung Fu Panda and its various sequels. And just because we can here, the various TV series, Legends of Awesomeness, The Paws of Destiny, and The Dragon Knight take place between these various films. Now, the exact time frame for these films is a bit difficult to nail down. A lot of the aspects of Chinese culture they borrow from are from different periods of of time. For example, the first movie has elements of architecture from both the Ming Dynasty and Qing Dynasty, which ran from the 14th to 17th centuries and the 17th to 20th centuries respectively. But the events of Kung Fu Panda 2 give us a way more exact date. In that movie, Po and the Furious Five face off against an angry old peacock named Lord Shin, and we learn that Shin's parents invented gunpowder while creating fireworks. However, Shin took their invention and weaponized it, and that, my friends, is why we can't have nice things, whether it's IRL or in the Dreamworks timeline. Historically, the use of gunpowder in weapons in China started during the Song Dynasty, who ruled from 960 to 1279 AD, and that is our foot in the door. And just to further drive this home, in a deleted scene from Kung Fu Panda 3, Po says,
Any idea how many Tang Dynasty shields we have here?
The Tang Dynasty reigned between the 7th and 10th centuries, right before the Song Dynasty rose to power. It's just perfect timing. But we can narrow it down even further thanks to exactly how the gunpowder is being used in these movies. See, as early as the 970s, the Songs were using flaming arrows with gunpowder as long-range weapons on the battlefield. But in Kung Fu Panda 2, we aren't talking about flaming arrows. The gunpowder is being used to build cannons. These sorts of proto-cannons were first used in the Song Dynasty around 1126 AD, so we're going to use that as an anchor point for the franchise, putting all of the Kung Fu Panda movies in the 1120s.
Yesterday is history. Tomorrow's a mystery, but today is a gift.
Wise words, Master Oogway. Wise words. Now, you might think it's a bit strange that we don't see any humans in stories like Kung Fu Panda despite existing on a world with humans. But there's a good reason for that, thanks to the next set of films in our timeline, Shrek, plus all of its sequels, specials, and spin-offs. Yeah, in these movies we get our first real look at probably the biggest and most important conflict in the Dreamworks universe, the persecution of talking animals. Throughout the Shrek movies, we see various talking animals hit with various levels of discrimination. The first time we meet Donkey, he's basically being sold like cattle. Same thing with a family of bears, the big bad wolf. 3 little pigs and 3 blind mice, all of them were being locked up in cages, and all of them were talking animals just trying to live their lives and get by, but were banished to Shrek's swamp along with the other fairy tale creatures. Even heroes like Puss in Boots will often decide to shed their clothes and live as pets, resigning themselves to simpler existence in exchange for safety. And that's a pattern that will only continue to get worse as time goes on in this world. It's really kind of dark when you think about it. As Shrek himself says,
Look, I'm not the one with the problem, okay? It's the world that seems to have a problem with me.
people really can be the worst. But when exactly on our timeline is all of this happening? Well, fortunately for us, Shrek has some very enthusiastic and very thorough fans. Over on Reddit, for instance, a leading Shrek scholar, and yes, that is a real thing that actually exists, user Cheesy Stuff 14 laid out an incredibly detailed timeline for the Shrek films, one that's pretty definitive if I can't say so myself. There's way too much detail to cover everything here today, but it's definitely worth a read if you want all of the Shrek lore pumped directly into your veins. But for our purposes, here are the key points. Firstly, during Shrek 3's dream sequence, we can see that Shrek graduated in 1409, thanks to Roman numerals, so right off the bat, we know we're in the 1400s for this franchise. The original Puss in Boots, a prequel that takes place before Shrek, opens on a festival with bonfires and fireworks, mirroring St. John's Eve celebrated across Spain's coastal cities. This holiday is observed on June 23rd, and we know that this happened on a Tuesday thanks to the Dance Fight Tuesday night scene. The only year June 23rd fell on a Tuesday around this time was 1416. The series Adventures of Puss in Boots would also slot in right before this movie, and it even has an episode with a blood moon that has magical significance, just like the rest of this universe. But no joke, this show ends with the Earth's total annihilation and the cast using a magical stone to rewind time and undo that, thus avoiding all of the adventures to begin with. Even in the canon of the show didn't happen. Jumping forward slightly, we know that Shrek and Shrek 2 took place in 1421 and 1422 respectively, thanks to an issue of the Far, Far Away Times found on the Shrek 2 DVD. That put Shrek 2 in June of 1422, and given that this film takes place after Shrek and Fiona's extended honeymoon, it makes sense for the first film to be about a year prior. Shrek 3 takes place in the autumn of 1424, thanks to evidence from the lunar calendar, calendar. Again, shoutouts to Reddit user CheesyStuff14 for working that one out. It's crazy. Because of that, we can figure out that Shrek and Fiona's kids would be born in 1425, and we see their first birthday in Shrek Forever After, putting that film in 1426. The filmmakers estimated that Puss in Boots: The Last Wish takes place 10 years after Forever After, putting that date in 1436. And finally, though it isn't out yet, we can see that Shrek's children will be teenagers in Shrek 5, meaning that it should take place in the 1440s. Man, that was tedious to put together, but thankfully the next film's gonna be way easier, and that would be The Road to El Dorado, which takes place in 1519. Thank you, on-screen title card. We love it when they make it easy for us. By the way, I gotta say, this movie, absolute classic. Big childhood memories on this one. Also, we see more evidence of the moon deity in this film too. In the High Priest's book, we see an artistic rendition of the boy in the moon, suggesting that some cultures native to the Americas knew of the deity and worshipped him in some form. From here, we can once again fast forward to Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron, which we can place in the late 1860s. How? Well, it takes place during the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. Though work on the railroad began in 1863, it didn't really pick up steam until pick up steam. I didn't even realize it did that. It didn't really pick up steam until the years after the Civil War, and its main route was completed in 1869. And you know what? It probably could have been done a lot earlier if not for Spirit. Anyway, that also brings us to Spirit Untamed, where we can peek at a newspaper that dates this film to 1887. Thanks for that one, DreamWorks animators. It's nice to have a couple dates that are just set in stone. These movies also show us just how much can change with the talking animals after the humans started treating them poorly. Though Spirit in these films seems to understand human speech, at least like a little bit, he can't speak their language like Puss in Boots or the masters in Kung Fu Panda. Anyway, our next film is a bit more challenging to place: Chicken Run. Just like Spirit, we once again see a society of chickens who seem to understand human speech but never actually talk to the humans. Understandable since they're trying to kill them. Anyway, I've seen some people online claim that this calendar right here shows July 1959, but most calendars run Saturday through Sunday. If that's the case here, that means that the first fell on a Tuesday, and in 1959, that only happened twice, in September and December. Judging from the leafless trees in the movie and the fact that there are a lot of knitted hats in the film, we're gonna say that it's winter, and therefore takes place in that December date, putting Chicken Run in December of 1959. And with that settled, we can now head over to an absolute English classic, Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. Yeah, this one's strange because it itself is part of a wider franchise, but this was the only movie made by DreamWorks, so it's the only one that counts. Tragic, because I would just love for bits like this to be canon.
Come on, Gromit, we've got to hide the body!
Anyway, this one once again features a sentient animal that understands human speech, but doesn't talk. It's becoming more and more of a pattern in this universe, isn't it? Now, placing Curse of the Were-Rabbit is a bit of a wild ride. Harry Bunting, over on Medium, found that the pest control van in the movie has a real registration, ATK 117B, and DreamWorks' co-producer on this movie, Aardman Animations, drove a real version of the van around to promote the film with the same registration. Using that, we can see that the vehicle was manufactured in 1964, so the movie has to take place after that. Additionally, the prices at the store use D to denote the old penny. The UK completely changed over to a decimal currency on Decimal Day, which was February 15th, 1971. So we know the movie has to take place between 1964 and early 1971. And finally, we see a calendar where September 17th falls on a Saturday, and between 64 and 71, only one year had September 17th on a Saturday, 1966, so Wallace and Gromit must take place then. But while the calendar lets us nail down that date, it doesn't really help us for our next film, Boss Baby. Jeez, do we really have to talk about Boss Baby? Yeah. Okay. This one has a completely illegible calendar in the background throughout the entire film. We were so close, but just so far away. Even the titular Boss Baby's birth certificate omitted the year, but thankfully, in the final moments of the film, we do get one concrete date. March 31st, 2017, the date that Tim's daughter Tina was born. We know that the Boss Baby sequel takes place 30 years after the main events of the first film, so that puts Boss Baby in 1987. God, that was a lot of work. But next up, there's Ants, with its creepy, uncanny, well, ants. This one always gave me the heebie-jeebies, I'm not gonna lie. Now, we don't have a lot of clues to work with to date this one, but in the final shot, as the camera pans out, you can see New York City looking roughly like it did in the mid-90s. Notice how the Twin Towers are still visible? That means it had to take place before 2001. So we're just going to go with the year that the movie was released, 1998. So, okay, believe it or not, but all of this was the easy part of the timeline. Like, once we hit the year 2000, things get way more complicated for the Dreamworks theory. I mean, seriously, how the heck are we gonna make Monsters vs. Aliens and Megamind work? Where are the Trolls movies gonna fit in here? And how the heck is the B movie the key to this whole theory? Well, loyal theorists, we did figure all of that out and more. And if you want to see how we did it, you'll just have to subscribe for part 2 before the end of the year. Don't forget to leave a comment with the code word for who you would think would win in a fight, and remember that it's always just a theory. A film theory. And cut.